it is my understanding that in the discussions between Anthony Albanese and Peter Dutton over the Voice, Albanese warned Dutton that that him opposing the Voice would play to what he viewed as his weak suit in terms of being perceived as too negative.
You were in some of those discussions, David Littleproud. What can you reflect? I mean, you're not obviously going to talk about private discussions on air, but can you give us a sense of how those meetings went?
Yeah, and in fact, the Prime Minister talked about one of those discussions that Peter Dutton and I were in, and I hadn't spoken about it publicly, that he said that there'd be a bipartisan approach in the design of this. But also at that meeting, we made it very clear to him that this didn't look good. Don't divide the nation. Don't put the nation through this. Pull the pin, reset, recalibrate, go back to proper process, go back to a constitutional convention, get the bipartisanship that we need to get across the line. And in Peter's defence, just appreciate this, because we came out in November. The Liberals didn't come out till April. Peter asked 14 questions of the Prime Minister to try and get more detail. So he actually did everything he could to educate his party room and get his party room to a position, an informed position. But the Prime Minister refused to not only take him into his trust, but he failed to take the Australian people in his trust. I mean, you can say that we were going to go and co-design this. They're not. Whoever's got the majority in the Parliament designs the Voice. And he has control of Parliament. He should have actually tabled that legislation, not just for the politicians, but for the Australian people. And that's where the Prime Minister has missed this. Peter Dutton gave him every opportunity. And I think they're going to try and cast Peter as the villain here, but I think unfairly. Peter genuinely tried to go through a process.
Is the fact that he might be cast as a villain one of the reasons on Sunday Agenda 3 or 4 weeks ago he said, I'll do another referendum?
Well, just appreciate that. That has been coalition policy on recognition in isolation, just on recognition. And as you saw in your package earlier, when you
so you would welcome another referendum?
Well, let's not rush into this. I think we just put the nation through a lot of trauma. But there's proper processes, and what wasn't afforded to the Australian people was a proper process. All that happened with this was 250 invited Indigenous Australians got to turn up to Uluru and design the intent and the question itself, and not a constitutional convention where we draw on the wisdom, the collective wisdom of this nation to make sure that it goes to the very heart of what we're trying to change, and there's no unintended consequences. That would have taken a lot of this conjecture away, but the Prime Minister didn't want to go down that track. He didn't respect the processes that have stood this country in good stead for many generations.
Just to back in that point there, underscoring it in relation to the Liberal Party, the rules are if there is a party platform, it stands until such time the decision is taken to remove it. So Peter Dutton is basically just restating what had been a principle since Howard, restated by Abbott, endorsed by Turnbull and then Morrison, about a constitutional referendum question about recognition. So I will be surprised, I'll say this tonight, I'm one of those Liberals who do not support a voice in the Constitution, who do not support a legislated voice, who would hate to see local voices and all the other manifestations that have come out of this debate. Not every Liberal shares the view that there should be a voice after this result. And I think that will be a big debate the Liberal Party will have.
And what about another constitutional recognition question?
Well, you know,
that's what I was...
When I went back and looked at 99 and realised that not even then 40% of Australians would support something in the preamble. If this goes down tonight, Andrew, you've got two circumstances now where the Australian people have been asked about recognition, and on both, if it goes down, on both accounts, they've said no. So I think you have to think very carefully about where you go to from here.
Chris Kenny, one of the other things that we've been talking about the lack of bipartisanship, but there's another moment in this campaign where I thought that the Yes camp, the government, could have accepted the olive branch extended by Julie and Lisa and amend some of the language. Do you think that was a missed opportunity?
Well, look, I think there have been quite a few missed opportunities, and as I said at the outset, I think the political class has let down voters here. I don't think this nation deserved to have something so important as Indigenous recognition in the Constitution and a voice, the next vital step in reconciliation, to be lost in a toxic partisan divide. We needed to have some sort of compromise, and there are a number of steps along the way. The trouble with Julie and Lisa's suggestions, and those of many others, was it's very clear that Peter Dutton and the coalition didn't want to compromise. They wanted to oppose this, and they did. Now, you were just... And what's tragic about this for the country is everybody on this panel and everybody watching, one thing everybody in this country agrees on is that the current state of Indigenous affairs and Indigenous disadvantage in this country is deplorable. And yet, if this referendum is defeated tonight, It's a vote for the status quo to keep this deplorable situation.
No,
so that's
I think
pretty sad.
It's a rejection of the model that was put up, Chris, to be fair.
Yeah, it's the status quo. Everything stays the same. Nothing changes if we vote no. That's just a simple fact.
I think you can change the system without changing the Constitution.
You can, but you have to start that tomorrow because this confirms the status quo. So it is very sad for the country. But when it comes to the political impact, I think that's overstated. Well, I think Tom Connell summarised at the start how Bob Hawke lost all those 6 referendum questions and still went on to win many elections.
Yeah, but the difference was they were administrative. Like when I went back through the history of all the referenda, most of them have been administrative changes.
Oh,
and I think
John Howard's was the Republic.
Yes, but put that one to one side. The Hawke ones we're talking about, it goes on to win these landslide elections. They were administrative losses. I think this is much bigger. Although I do agree with Michelle, I think the bark for the Prime Minister will be perhaps internally people thinking, has he not got the judgement required to carry these very big issues?
As you know, there are senior Liberals who thought that if they could defeat him on the Voice, it might jeopardise his leadership. And I think that's way over the top.
I think that's over the top.
I think it just takes a bit of bark off him.
I think that's over the top.
And I think Peter Dutton probably loses a bit too in terms of that image that you were...
But I don't think that this makes Peter Dutton an unelectable hard man. If that's what Labor's line's going to be tomorrow, I think that's false as well. I don't think either leader, and the test will be how they deal with it later on tonight with the result. But I think you would be overstating it to make this about the two leaders.